Hello, welcome to the 18th day of July 2025. My name is Kurt, and this is my daily Good Life meditation. This is an exercise that I do every day at 5:30 a.m. to remember my life objectives and principles, those which are outlined in my book, Going Alone, which you can read for free at goingalone.org. I also use this time to think about the last 24 hours and how I did with any noteworthy challenges or opportunities that I met. I reflect on the objectives of my creed and pull out one principle to examine carefully, and then I plan for the coming day. But before any of that, first, welcome to new subscribers to the channel. It's nice to have you here. Quick note that this is a personal journal video, and though I'm in Japan, this is Japan happening over my shoulder there. This video is not about necessarily Japan, other than my if it plays into recounting some of the interesting moments that happened yesterday, where interesting is defined as challenging, where I had moments that I was challenged and I either did well or I did poorly. I'm not very interested in the moments that I did normally. Where normal, though, well, that could be, discussed. Sometimes normal is a very good thing, right? Especially if what's normal, and I will be talking about something that's kind of normal now, today in today's talk, because sometimes what is normal now wouldn't have been normal a decade ago. That's noteworthy. That's a change. That's an improvement, maybe. So with that, let's get started. I will talk about sensitive subjects, just so you know. Lastly, though, one more thing. Thank you for watching my video. Your support means a lot to me, and especially thank you for my members on YouTube and my supporters on Patreon. I really do appreciate you. All right, a quick check of the weather before we get going. Let's go ahead and note it down. It's just past 5:30 a.m. and it's currently 24. Let's see, 24 degrees, and I would say 85% humidity right now. I expect that by the time I'm done, that humidity will drop a little bit as the temperature begins to rise. But it's although it's in the red zone for temperature, for humidity, it's totally in the green zone for temperature. Feels really nice. Let's get started. A couple of notes from yesterday. Normally I only have like one or two notes. Today I have three, going over the last 24 hours. The first note, and this harkens back to what I just said about the pedestrian, the normal, being noteworthy when we refer it back to the past. And the note is navigated the seeming past with ease. Now, after let's parse out those words, right? Navigated the seeming past with ease. Now, I deliberately put that seeming in there. Hold on. Did I mean that the way I wrote it? Just a second. Let me think about this for a second. Because I remember deliberately stopping and reinserting that seeming, but now it's escaping me a bit about what part of yesterday's experience was the seeming past. Maybe I put that word in the wrong place. This is the challenge of getting old, right? I mean, they say that, when you get old, you can't remember where you left your keys. For me, I can't remember. I can't remember what the thoughts I had in mind 5 minutes ago. Although the deep past is an abiding memory. I can literally remember what I had for breakfast when I was 24 years old, before going to university in the morning, but I can't remember why I put that word seeming right there. Maybe I just go ahead and explain the experience, which might come through. So, couples and people have epochs in life. Yumiko and I, my wife and I, have been together for close to 40 years. which from the age of 24 to now, which means that we've gone through some major epochs together, including, as I sometimes think about it, the period of life before children arrive, the practice period when, young couples married or, get a dog together, which is practice for raising a kid. And they develop a knit community of friends about the same age. And those couple friends tend to, by that time, kind of the couples kind of cluster together, because I think biology is doing this. They're preparing the couples for the onslaught feels that way, of parenthood, and they'll need the support and the commiseration and the fellowship of other couples going through the same thing. I'm confident that that's how our biology is wired. You see it happen over and over again. The communities of singles, transform into the communities of couples. The singles, this group of single friends begin to, the single friends peel off as they couple up and go off, and they become communities with couple friends, where the remaining single friends might feel out of place if they go and there's a baby shower going on. It feels awkward. Anyway, unique when I largely passed through that phase in the United States, leading in the mid to late 90s, from about 92 to 2003. It was a long decade. It was a decade of fraternity, so to speak, where we had our couple friends, a whole community of them, mommy groups, dad committees, so to speak, right? We would get together at our homes and have barbecues, and that was even before the kids arrived. We would do this, and then after the kids started popping into the equation, we would get together and bring the kids and talk about it and compare notes, and this is the human thing that happens, right? By the time we came to Japan in 2003, that phase had largely been played out. If we had stayed, we probably would have continued with that group, that social circle, but because we left that circle behind. And we never really adopted a new social circle of family, of family friends when we came to Japan. But we did have peripheral connections through the community. For example, in Japan, if you don't adopt such communities yourself, Japan will, by virtue of it, the way Japan works, will put you in such a community, more so for women than for men. Men are mostly expected just to be the breadwinners, to go away, as Japanese good housewives used to say, to be healthy and absent. Go away, be healthy and absent. Women, on the other hand, though, are kind of pulled into, housewives, mothers, are pulled into the circle of the Kodomo Kai, the community center, the Hogo Shakai, I think it's called, it's like the PTA type of a thing. And my wife certainly was. She became the president of the PTA and was an active member of the Kodomo Kai. And there are other things, like the dads will get wrangled in for the sports day. We get, saddled up with all the responsibility to participate in the parents' events, And also here in Yara, where I live, there's the annual summer festival, and the fathers would all come together to assemble the great big, platform for the Obon for the summer festival dance, not the Obon dance, but the summer festival dance. Now, as such, Yumiko got deep into it. I mean, deep enough that she was on, recognizable terms with all the other mothers. Me, I recognized the guys. I knew a couple of them, but not really close. We just came together once in a while. Like I said, dads are a little bit peripheral to this. But I do remember having a lot of difficulty with that. It didn't go well for me. Well, one, because I don't speak the language very well. That was a challenge. I have a subtle thought about that one. Subtle, I think, to add. The second reason was that I was still striving. I was so distracted by getting by and by my ample failures. I failed so often. I've been such a failure most of my life. I've tried so hard and I always seem to fall flat on my face over and over and over again. And that's frustrating. It's like trying to be it's like being invited to a, a birthday party on a day, on a Friday night when you've had a really bad Friday. You know, work's been bad. You had a fender bender with the car. The cop pulled you over and gave you a ticket. You know, the clerk at the store was a jerk. Maybe I was a jerk. I don't know. I remember moments like that. I remember with shame moments when I was the jerk. And then you go to the party and you can't really enjoy it because, you know, you were a jerk and it was a bad day and you got pulled over and you had an accident, etc., etc., all of those different things. For me, that's what being in my 40s was about. The whole friggin' decade of the 40s was about. The whole damn thing. I wouldn't want to go back to the decade of the 40s if you paid me to do that. I've said it many times. I haven't said it recently, but every decade has gotten progressively better in my life. You know, the 30s were worse. The 20s were awful. You know, the 50s were barely tolerable. The 60s are, but the 50s were much better than the 40s, which were much better than the 30s, et cetera, all the way down. 60s are turning out to be pretty good so far. I think this is in good shape. I don't know how much longer I have with this, though. Anyway, I kind of get off gray from the point. So, we did things in our 40s after we came to Japan, and we got into the family thing, and my wife would say, "Okay, we've got sports day coming up, and you know, there's this costume you need to wear, Kurt, and you can go and play the adults game, throwing the balls into the hoops and stuff like that." And okay, I'll do it. I'll put on a smile and I'll do it. And I did it. And it was never really very fun. I enjoy it now in hindsight, memories, because the pain is gone. But I didn't enjoy it at the time. And there were a couple of times that we actually went over to people's houses. You know, Yumiko would make friends and those friends would invite us over. And it was usually the women that were behind it all. And the men would come along. And most of the men were like me. They were like, do I really have to do this? You know, will there be beer? You know, maybe hard alcohol, you know, to get us by. I struggled with those things. I really, really struggled. So I was a little anxious when one of the mother friends from the past that my wife had invited my wife and I over to their place, literally just right over there, for coffee in the afternoon. We did that yesterday. Just the four of us, just us two couples. Excuse me. And that old anxiety came back. Now I know them. I know the husband, probably better than most of the guys I know around here. He's a good guy, good family. They go deeper than that. They have one son. He was in the same age and same grade as Emily. In fact, he was Emily's first date. He invited Emily just before she came back to America on a date, and the two of them went out to downtown to see a movie together. So not only are they friends, so to speak, acquaintances, kind of, becoming friends from the past, from all those associations, but if life had gone a little bit differently, they could have potentially been our in-laws. So, just interesting people. So I was nervous going into it. Now remember, the point of this video is not to tell you the blow by blow of what happened in the last 24 hours, although that comes through sometimes, but rather to find and shine a light on the moments that were difficult, and then to examine whether I dealt with it well or whether I dealt with it poorly. And if I dealt with it well, how is it that I dealt with it well? What is it that I did that allowed me to do that so I can do more of that in the future? And if I dealt with it poorly, well, what could I change in the future about the way that I'm interacting with the world? How could I better apply the values in going alone? Or sometimes maybe I need to add a new value. If I can, that usually happens when I have a good moment, when I successfully did something well and navigated a difficult moment well, and I look at it and I say, well, look at this thing, this event, and say, well, how did I manage to do that? And then I realize I did it by virtue of some virtue that is not codified in my book. Well, then I have an opportunity to slip a new value in. That doesn't happen very often anymore, but it could. That's why I do this every day. So, how did it go? I was nervous. Beforehand, we met them at 2 o'clock. Yumiko and I went to Jusco. If you watch today's Retiring in Japan video, you'll see all the build up to it. I was nervous. It doesn't show through in the video, though, I don't think. It didn't show any video of the actual encounter. That would be untoward to be turning on the camera or taking photos while we're having a nice cake and coffee moment. Just to cut to the chase, though, it went really, really well. Now, this is the point where I have to ask myself, why did it go so well? What happened? Well, and if you hear me use the word hashtag and then a funny phrase like homunculus, hashtag Anchorhold, hashtag reason, I'm referring to principles and objectives in my book. Well, first of all, I used hashtag, as always is the case, temperance, to temper the emotion as it was rising. Now, it was rising for a couple of days. I knew this was coming, and it would kind of rise. And my emotions always rise like from my gut. You feel them rising up. And if they get as far as here, that's not good. Because once they get to here, they start to show. It shows on my face. My wife can still see it probably if it's down here, but it starts to show on my face. Worse yet, I start saying things that I regret. Shows on visibly, all the stuff that I couldn't control in my 40s, right? It would rise right up, and I would be arms like this or arms like this akimbo, and scoffing or scowling at the world, and everyone knows that Kurt's having a bad day, and I don't want that to happen anymore. There's another hashtag Offal. The Feast of Offal principle says that I don't want to be spreading my difficulties onto others, right? Why would I be spoiling a nice coffee cake afternoon just because I'm uncomfortable? So hashtag temperance. Push it down. Now, when I was growing up in the 70s, they said, don't do that, that it'll explode. And that's not the case. Maybe it'll do that if you don't address it, but I just push it down. And then while I'm holding it down, I'm referring to my values. And I'm saying, okay, well, how am I going to deal with this? What can I use? What can I draw from my values to address this? And I deal with it. I find ways to let it out, like steam off of a vent. Or I find a way to have a talk with my emotions and say, hey, this is not a reasonable thing to be feeling. Here's why. They listen, believe it or not. Because it's just me, after all. It's just me and my talking to myself inside. So first I use temperance to hold it down. So you're getting nervous. It's coming up. You're going to go out and have cake and coffee with these people. You're getting nervous. And then I used reason. Hashtag reason. I said reason, it always seems to be the case. Temperance followed by reason. Temperance followed by reason. It's a very stoic approach to control our emotions, control our reaction, and then apply reason to come up with a solution. And then what I decided was that, and I planned this out before I got there, was that although they speak, the husband speaks English pretty well, it's awkward for me. The wife doesn't. It's fine. I'm fine with speaking English with people in a situation where everybody understands here, right? But I know what it's like to be the person that doesn't understand, right? It feels you're the odd person, odd man or woman out. I don't want to be in Japan putting any Japanese person in a situation where they feel uncomfortable because they don't follow what's going along because, for example, their husband speaks English very well, and my wife, of course, speaks English very well. The three of us could carry on a conversation, and his wife feels left out. So even though one of the problems was the language barrier, right? I said, well, what am I going to do? Because I want to engage in conversation, but my Japanese isn't as good. His English is better than my Japanese. I know I've seen this movie before. We wind up speaking English and the wife feels left out. So I used reason and I said, well, Kurt, what you're going to do is he can talk to you in English. You'll respond in Japanese. Do the very best that you can. You will initiate your whatever you say in Japanese, Kurt. You will be in Japan and you will speak Japanese. You will only use English as a bit of a crutch. If, for example, I'm struggling with a particular word, I'll throw that word in, but I'll try to find a Japanese way to, illustrate that point, so that I can make sure she's included. This is my effort of trying to make sure that I'm basically living in Japan, right? Now, I know that it's awkward, it's painful for people to hear my Japanese. I know that's the case, but I think it is better if that's the case. So that was the one thing I did. I came there with a little plan, right? First plan was, okay, speak Japanese, Kurt. Use English to illustrate the point. Use English if you need to cross a difficult chasm, but then try to cover up my tracks with as much broken Japanese as I can to make sure that the wife can follow with saying nonverbal cues can go a long ways. I'm pretty adept at finding a way. That was the first plan, first decision. The second decision, and this was a new one for me. This was interesting. I couldn't have pulled this off in my 40s. Even though I say I don't really want friends anymore, which is true, I don't really want friends. It's not because I think that friendship phase of my life has largely been past. Curious a thing as that is, I think that friends facilitate phases of our lives, right? They help us when we're, locking arms to get through a thing, creating a phalanx to take on the world together, right? Or just to share some moments with that we want to fill time in some way that where time doesn't fill us. You know what I mean? And I don't really need that anymore. I went alone, but the punchline of going alone is the coming back. And 5 years ago, I would have thought that the coming back would have meant that I'd become a social animal again, and I haven't. I came back and I'm like, I appreciate society. I engage in society. I can do society, but I don't need society anymore. Nor does my wife. But just basically, as long as we have each other. Now, if I didn't have Yumiko, maybe I'd seek out someone or, some companion. Maybe I'd find a stool on a bar somewhere and become a norm. Maybe, if I didn't have Yumiko. But I've got her. I've got the dogs. I don't need all of that. Anyway, I've kind of gone off on a tangent. But the point was, and there was a point to that tangent. The point was, that wasn't always the case. Although I've always been kind of a loner, I've always been very good, I think, at social engagement. I can enter a social scene, a milieu of people, and I can clink glasses with the best of them, drum up stories of the past, share anecdotes, make people laugh, make my wife blush in the company of others in a way that makes her feel she's getting attention. Because my wife's not a social butterfly so much, but I'm even good at making her feel, drawing her in a way that makes her blush in an endearing manner. I'm very good at all of that. I've always been good at all of that, even though I don't care for it very much. It's been a skill that I've had. It works very well in America where I speak the language. One of the problems that I had in my 40s when we would sometimes get together with people here was that I would try to do that here with this poor Japanese. It comes across as kind of an overly energetic and engaged person who's filling time in the vacuum of silence with what appears to be nervous energy and speech. Now that kind of works a little bit in America where we rev up the party. We get the music cranking, at least in our circle we do. We get the music cranking, we get the wine and the beer going, and we're just going, it works. Here it's not the same. The Japanese are different. For example, the Japanese are quite all right long moments of silence. So for example, with the four of us, and I notice from Miko's family, they'll eat a whole meal in utter silence, and it's just fine. Very normal, in fact. Many Japanese families are like that. But I also notice it when they're doing social interchange. Um, and I knew this before, but I wasn't strong enough or I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to leverage that I should follow suit. For example, yesterday we would be sitting there, the four of us, and the conversation would kind of wane, and nobody would say anything. We just sit there, and it was this long silence where the person in me, the American in me, is thinking, well, Kurt, you either fill this awkward vacuum with something to say, or let's get the hell out of here, this party's done, right? It's one of those two options. It's not the case with the Japanese. Sometimes with the Japanese, it's like just letting the moment kind of settle, let the air settle, the echoes of the conversation that was just had, the very mature and adult conversation. Boy, Japanese people do adulting really well. Kind of just reverberate, let the thoughts go. And this is something that I learned from working in Japan, in having the big meetings in Japan. Sometimes people have something that they want to say, but they don't want to step over one another in saying it. They don't want to, like, probably one of the most uncomfortable things would be for two Japanese people to suddenly blurt out interjecting a new topic at the same moment. It's like, it would be like two cars coming to. That's why they don't have four-way stop signs in Japan, because if you have a four-way stop sign, then they have to negotiate who goes first, right? The Japanese don't want to do that. So they'd rather, every four-way street that you see will either have a signal or there'll be stop sign on two of the streets, and the other two won't. They'll have the right of way, because they don't want to have that interchange. They don't want to have that conflict. It's the same with conversation. So sometimes this long silence seems engineered almost as an opportunity, culturally engineered as an opportunity to give the person that wants to say something but is a little bit too shy to say something, a long runway to say what they want to say. It works. So you sit there, and I remember that. So remember, I used temperance to control the emotion. I said, Kurt, you're going to speak Japanese. That was my first plan. The second plan I said was, Kurt, you're not going to lead the conversation. This is not your world. This is not your area of expertise. I will be, as they say sometimes, I will speak when spoken to, which means that I need to endure, abide, respect, attend the, for me, awkward silence. And it happened. I would say I could almost count it 4 or 5 times in the course of 2 hours that we sat at that table, going through 2 cups of iced coffee each and a tray of oatmeal flapjacks from England. That's what they called them. Oatmeal flapjacks and a small plate of chocolates. 4 or 5 times that silence descended upon the room, I sat there and looked down at the crumbs on my plate. Mm-hmm. And I said, Kurt, I'm going to let the Japanese do their thing. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, the wife, the husband, was the more conversationally dominant, sounds too strong a word. He led the conversation for the most part. The wife had some things to say. Those moments of long silence were her runway and invitation to do just that. And so she did. She had pointed questions for both Yumiko and I about our lives. She was very curious about our lives in America, how we went back, why we came back to Japan. They had lots of questions. No, it was great, and it felt great to do that. And I could remember in the moment, I was like, man, in my 40s, I would have been like a bull in a china shop, because I would have spotted that awkward silence, and I would have looked around the house and said something stupid about something hanging on the wall. That's a beautiful piece of art, or something like that. Just anything to fill the void, depriving that woman of her opportunity to ask her question. So, hashtag maturity, another one of the principles from the book. hashtag slow, which is the objective of doing one thing. Hashtag one thing at a time. I can't get one word out of that. One of my objectives is to do just one thing at a time and do that thing slowly and deliberately and carefully. So I'd gone into the room even before we walked up to the street, gifts in hand. We had flowers and peaches that we had bought. Peaches are a very suitable gift here. They're very costly and delicious. As we walked up there, I had gone up there with tempering my emotions. I'd put on my best shirt, tempering my emotions, saying with two decisions. I'm going to speak Japanese. I'll only use English if it's absolutely necessary to get through a challenging bit. And if I do use English, I'll try to do what I can to clarify the meaning in Japanese so that the wife who doesn't speak English so well can make sure she understands what the gist of the conversation was. Two, I'm not going to speak unless I'm spoken to for the most part. I didn't follow that one completely because I was kind of curious about, he had a kakoi, pretty cool looking shirt, and I wanted to ask him about his shirt, so I did interject that. I did come forth with, I have a question. But for the most part, I listened. And I waited for the conversation to come to me. I then conversed in Japanese, and then I fell silent again. And it went really, really well. Very pleased with that. And I kind of surprised myself with my Japanese. It reminded me of, I'm not afraid to speak Japanese. It's just that my Japanese isn't very good, but I'm not afraid. It reminded me of in 2013, Yumiko and I came for 10 days before we just came back to live in Japan. We came to 10 days to reconnoiter the area. And we attended a seminar of house buying seminar with there were about 8 couples like ourselves, retirees looking to relocate and buy a home. And so we paid for this event, and it was a pretty big event. And we got to tour some houses, and we got to talk with representatives from the city about the home buying process. The reason I'm saying this is I'm going to give you another anecdote about how my changed approach has changed my life. Before, when we lived here before, I'm not a follower necessarily, but I wouldn't let my wife would lead all such things because she's the Japanese. But when we went to this home buying event, I was so surprised. The couples were introducing themselves one down the other. And when it got to us, I put my hand on my wife's shoulder and I said, I got this. And I stood up in all in Japanese. I gave the whole introduction that we're from America, we're retiring soon, we're coming to Japan, we're looking for a house to buy, we're like, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. I told who we are. And it all just flew out. I don't think I said a single word of English. And I sat down and I turned to Yumiko, and in Japanese I said, do you want to you want anything? Did I miss anything? And she said, nope, you covered it all in Japanese. And I was like, okay. That's what yesterday was like. It was that same experience of having a plan, executing, maintaining control of my emotions, and then executing that plan and having good results. So I have just spent a long time illustrating this first note here, which is navigated the seeming past with ease. I think the reason I said it, I don't know why I use the word seeming now, because going to that house yesterday was a direct seeming experience of we went to a couple's house when we were living here before, with an event with 2 other couples, where I fell flat on my face because all of the things I said that I didn't know, right? I was too much an American, too much a young man, too much incompetence, and it didn't go well. And so yesterday it was the seeming past, but it wasn't the past, because that past is gone way, way, way back in the rearview mirror. It's a roadside rest that we stopped at, 3 hours ago on the highway of life, to be precise. a decade and a half ago. Okay, there are two other notes here. One is, and I do need to watch the time because I do have radio exercise this morning. I did also have a moment. Remember, this exercise is me looking for moments where I either did well or if I did poorly, so I can talk about how I did that and tune myself. I had more incidents of driving incompetence. We were going to Jusco yesterday, and I made a Eon, aka, and I made a gross driving error, which then cascaded into my wife thinking that I didn't know where the hell I was doing anything. I did. And she then began, and my wife's very good about that. She doesn't backseat drive. She was literally trying to help me out, but I knew where I was going, and it was easier than to say, I know. I simply said, and it clicked in automatically because I've been training myself. I said, okay, Kurt, you made a big mistake. It wasn't a dangerous mistake. It was a navigation mistake. You made a big navigation mistake, Kurt. Now Yumiko is kicking in to help you to avoid a bigger mistake, because if I didn't do the thing that she suggested, that would have cascaded into a still bigger mistake, which would have been another 5 minutes out of our way to correct. So Yumiko stepping in and giving a little backseat driving was really helpful, even though I knew better. By the second thing wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to make that mistake. And I was surprised at how quickly Temperance pushed it down. Reason kicked in and saw that whole thing I just said in a flash. And I simply turned to her and I said, thank you. You're right. That would be the right way to go. And no emotion. There wasn't any emotion. It wasn't like I was holding back any anger or anything like that. It was like just happened in a split second. I keep describing it when the principles and the objectives in my book, if I practice them enough, they're like karate moves that, someone comes up and they tap you on the shoulder and that all happens, right? And you don't have to think about it. That's exactly what it's like to practice these values over and over, year after year. They become second nature. The third item here is hard work, and it says feels great. I had a great day of work. I worked really hard yesterday, and one of you left a comment. I really do appreciate about shipping. If you happen to see this video about Japan giving up the small packet registered mail, thank you if you see that comment. I left a comment in response, but that's a big heads up. That's very helpful what you said about them changing it in 2026, because the work that I'm doing now to set up shipping in my store, I'd have to redo it all again if I didn't know that, and now I know it thanks to you. All right, so there was that. I had a good hard day of work. Let's go over the creed real quick. 8 objectives. Again, these are in my book. You can read it at goingalone.org in the chapter titled The Good Life. Number 1 objective, to be always ready to die. 2, to make good and effective use of time. 3, to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. 4, to cultivate good emotional reactions. 5, to perform good actions relative to my creed. 6, to recognize my true limits and true opportunities. 7, to do just one thing at a time and do that thing slowly and deliberately and carefully, which I'm not doing now. I'm holding the book. And number 8 is to maintain my balance. I was violating 2 of my own objectives right there, wasn't I? I wasn't going slowly, and I was multitasking. It's so easy to slip into sloppy living, even in the very moment of the act of trying to remember what it means to live well. Okay, let's open up the book and go find the principle to read. I think I dog-eared the page. Yeah. The next principle is called the atomic principle. The sub-principles here are dissolution and emergence. Think about a body literally decomposing away into its constituent elements and compounds, and then emerging as something else, getting consumed by nature. If I die, you put me out in the forest, I'm going to dissolve away and become a whole bunch of other things, right? The atomic principle is this reminder of dissolution and reemergence, but never reemergence is the same thing. reemergences, other things. That's the nature of the atomic principle. And typically in the past, when I would read this principle out in the desert, I would pick up a handful of desert sand and let the sand flow through my fingers. Here's a very apt quote from Heraclitus. All things change to fire, and fire, exhausted, falls back into things. And here's my words. Everything in the universe is bits and pieces, flowing and changing, forever transforming and becoming. So too, you and me. Here for a bit, soon to pass, soon to dissolve, never again this thing once more. When remembering this principle, I will often pick up a handful of sand or dirt that sift through my fingers in the blowing wind. The atomic principle is a very simple principle that simply reminds me, and this is more than I actually say in the writing of it, but it comes out elsewhere in the book. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in a soul. I don't believe in forever. I think that what this is a momentary, even if it's 75 years, a momentary instantiation of consciousness out of the biological and electrochemical network of neurons, muscles, and all of the attendant structure that makes me who I am. This flash and spark of reason and consciousness is here for a very short period of time, and there's nothing magical about it, and it will flash out and go out forever. I mean, at least before I was born, I don't believe in determinism, I don't believe in fate, I don't even believe in free will, but at least before I was born, I was on the way, so to speak, right? Not after I'm dead. Never again this thing once more. That's the purpose of the atomic principle, to remind me of this very, very substantive impermanence that is the bedrock foundation of everything that is in these moments and every moment to come. Never again this thing once more. Now, for the next 24 hours, I have 2 notes here. I'm going to lead listing and shipping. My business is doing good. I had some good hearty sales this week. I have a lot to ship. I didn't ship yesterday because I was busy with all that other stuff. Also, I'm out of inventory. So what I really need to do, I say listing and shipping, I should need to flip that around. I'll put a little flip note here. I need to ship and then list. Well, I will list one item. I'll list one item. It's easy to do. It's part and parcel of what I do in the morning. But you get what I mean. I need to ship. All right, that's it. Let's go ahead and read the comments. Hi, Michael. Hi, Tim. Good morning. Weather check here in the evening. 20.4 C and 75% humidity outside. Weather station. 20.4 and 75. I'm at 27 now and 65. So a little warmer and a little less humid here. But you're on the flip side, you're in the evening. So I'm going to make a note here. 26, so the temperature here has risen 2 degrees since I started. It was 24 earlier. And it's gone down from 85 humidity down to, no, that's 68. That's 68% humidity. So the humidity here has dropped while the temperature has risen. Standard morning stuff. Thanks for the weather report, Tim. Good to see you, by the way. Thanks for your insightful comment that you left. I just responded to it this morning. I always appreciate your comments you left on the another video. Hi, Ray. Good morning. That looks like Korean to me. Hey there, whoever you are from Korea or speaking Korean or writing Korean, welcome. Ray says, I commented to X chapter he should try and collab with you. Think too would be neat. Well, thank you. Morning. Hey, Doo-Doo Army. Robert, there's Robert, believe in yourself. Good morning, Kurt. Hello, Michael. Robert says hi to everybody. Robert, you even know how to write in Korean. Wow. I think that's Korean, or is that Chinese? I think it's Korean, I don't know. Tim says hi to Robert. Robert says hi to Doo-Doo Army. Tim says, really hard to know what decade I would want to go back to. Perhaps 70s, before life became too serious. 80s, less so, as it was the striving decade. Probably 2000s, as my mom was still alive until 2014. Interesting question, huh? I would rather be right here, right now. I guess that speaks that I don't have a lot of, I don't look back at the past very fondly. That's a whole other video. Tim goes on. Sometimes it's the nervous emotion where you try to overcompensate to hide that emotion, sometimes to bad effect. And it's hard to hide that fact that we're doing that to others, right? Especially those that are in the know, right? That have been there, that have done that. They see, you're striving, you're struggling. Ray says the language issue isn't much of an issue anymore. Google Translate, ChatGPT Translate, both languages on the fly now. Even have conversations with people. Something happened. Oh, the comment disappeared. Tim says, I remember I had a Thai girlfriend many years ago, and my first conversation with her mother trying my Thai language handiwork couldn't have gone any worse until she spoke English. Ray says, understanding tatame and hone is a necessity when talking in a social setting. Willing to be most foreigners don't understand that. Yeah, that's true. And to also realize that even people that we think are our friends are really not showing us their private face. It seems like the only people that you can really see the private face are your family members or the people that you went to elementary school. That seems to be a bar that is allowed, right? If you went to elementary school, or better yet, kindergarten together, you don't have to put on any false front at all here. But you're right. And also, it's important to know to keep my face, the appropriate face, right? To not show too much. Americans tend to, share a lot really fast. That's weird here. I think the silence, although some people appreciate it, in fact, I think the silence element is the difference between East and West. You might think the silence is deafening and the urge is to fill that silence when it is not needed, like idle gossip. Yep, idle gossip, shudder. Tim says it's 19C and 81 now since we started. Wow. Interesting. So the temperature has changed quite a bit there. It's amazing how the temperature and humidity changed so much. Michelle says, thank you all for the thought-provoking discussion today. Food for thoughts. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you. All right, I've reached the bottom of the comments, and I have about 12 minutes to make it up the street for radio exercise. And by the way, the gentleman, the father that I had lunch with, or coffee and cake with yesterday, he's joining as well. So that's how we kind of got hooked up again, so to speak. So I look forward to seeing him. Robert says hi to Michelle. That's nice of you, Robert. Thank you. All right, everybody. Be safe, but not too safe. I hope you all, Evelyn, hey, there's Evelyn. I hope you have a fun day. Enjoy as well, Evelyn. Thinking about you, wishing you all the best. All right, especially after you told me about your mom. So, thoughts going out with you. And I remember, Evelyn, just want to point this out. What you do in life, what your mission is a very important one, and I really do respect and admire what you do with the dogs. Michelle says, thank you. Have a good one. You too. Bye, everybody.